Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the ARC of Massachusetts webinar series. Today, we're going to be hearing from Meg Gaydos, who works with our Widening the Circle Pathways to Friendship project. And Meg is going to be talking to us about building community networks and how do you develop relationships outside of the service system. So, before we begin, I just wanted to give you a couple technical updates. If you have any issues at all with the audio portion or the screen, just the best way to fix it is just to log off and log back on. You can click on that link again that you were sent in your email, and that seems to pretty much resolve all the issues. We are recording this session, and so we have muted you upon entry, and that just is because of we get a better sound quality when we do that. The other, information just wanted to share with you is that you will all get a copy of the PowerPoint after the session is over. And so I'm hoping that you can introduce yourselves so we can know who's in the audience. And we do leave our questions to the end, typically the last 15 minutes, and you can just chat in your questions. So if everybody could chat in to everyone and just introduce yourself. Are you a parent? Are you a professional? Are you both? That would be great, just so we can see who's in the audience. Okay, we've got Laura, who's a professional working with an agency. Any parents out there? Thought I saw a couple. All right, Alicia, Autism Family Support Specialist. Great. How about anybody else? Got a few more people on the phone. So looks like we do have a mix of both parents and professionals, which is great. So without further ado, let me hand it over to Meg, and she can begin the session and tell you a little bit about her background.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very happy to be here on behalf of the ARC and the Pathways to Friendship project. I am one of 5 facilitators of the Pathways project for the ARC, and I've been doing that for about a year and a half now, which means that I go out to various agencies and not only present Pathways trainings about people making friendships in the community, but also supporting the agencies in making specific connections for the individuals who are participants in the project. So it's a lot of fun, and we've seen some great success in the various agencies we've been working with. So aside from that, I also work with VenFin, and I've been with VenFin for about 13 years. That's a large agency in Massachusetts, and we have a huge variety of different services. I mostly work with people who are in individualized home supports. And in general, I've been in human services in one way or another, starting as direct support professional, as well as a family member for all my career as the professional, and I have a sister with a disability. So lots of involvement for a long time. So that's a little bit about myself, and I'm going to go ahead and start in with really giving the definition of friendships according to the one we use in the Pathways project. It's a friendship that exists between somebody with a disability and another person who does not have a disability. The second person is not a paid service provider, nor a family member, or someone receiving services. Not that there is anything wrong, of course, with two individuals who do receive services forming a friendship. Those are, extremely important. But for the purpose of today's webinar and for the purpose of the Pathways Project, we're talking about friendships between people with and without disabilities. So moving on to the importance and why it's important to develop and nurture the friendship, there's been a great amount of studies conducted, and a lot of research shows that people are just naturally happier with friends. And that really gives them an increased sense of belonging and purpose. It really improves their self-confidence as well as self-worth. I think we all can sort of attest to that. Also, studies have shown that people are actually healthier if they have friendships, that they have somebody in good times and also in not great times to help them reduce their stress, be a support person, to encourage us. So really adults with those strong social supports have reduced risk for significant health problems that can include depression, high blood pressure, unhealthy body mass index. So, and then people with friends actually have been shown in studies to live longer than people who have fewer connections. So that's certainly a positive. Lastly, people who have significant friendships are found to be safer. Isolation is a significant issue for many of the people that we support, and a sad reality of some of the folks with disabilities. So that's what we're really working against, and we want to do what we can to form the relationships and friendships to combat that. So next slide. So I'm going to be talking about useful strategies today that can be used in supporting a person to really cultivate a new friendship. And first of all, we can talk about the first, which is who do individuals know in their lives with whom a relationship can mostly develop? So we can look at obvious people, which can be neighbors, family, friends, coworkers. Those are examples of who is already possibly in individuals' lives. And what places do they go to on a consistent basis? There can be real possibility of deepening friendships when somebody may already be comfortable and well-known someplace where they go. And then thirdly, what common interests do individuals share with people in those places? Pathways, we found it really very helpful if there is a community interest survey completed with an individual that can determine their current interest, possibly activities they've tried in the past and may not actually want to engage in again, but as well as things that they would like to try in the future. So when we get this preliminary information, our focus can be how they like to spend their free time in doing the things they really love. So right now I'm a little bit curious. I was wondering in the audience, have any of you had experience in completing community interest surveys? And do you have examples of how activities or maybe experiences have resulted from the surveys? Have you gotten ideas that have been successful? You can use the chat box at the bottom of the screen if you want to type in anything that has worked as a result of some kind of a community interest survey. I think a lot of the agencies are using those these days. You can access a community interest survey. I actually can email out a good example of one. I have access to one that has been really helpful because, like I said, it details what people have tried in the past and what they might be interested in the future. So it's really a good tool to be used. It also has pictures as well as words, so it's really a good tool to be used for people who may not be able to read. So I certainly can email that out as part of the PowerPoint as well. So moving on to another possible strategy is to implement what's called a one-to-one matchmaking. This approach really seeks matches between people with and without disabilities right from the get-go. So the three examples on your screen are local agencies who can help with one-to-one matchmaking. And the first is Citizen Advocacy, and they're in North Quabbin. And that's basically what they do. So if you're not in that area, then they certainly could give you some advice, maybe some, different materials that they'd be willing to share with you. A second one is part of the Beta Community Partnership, and it's called Community of Friends. And then the third one, most people are probably familiar with, which is Big Brothers, Big Sisters, which is not necessarily specific just to people with disabilities, but has been helpful in making the match between people who happen to have disabilities and those that do not. And, you can just go on the website. There's certainly chapters all over Massachusetts. So next slide. Okay, so this strategy is really talking about exploring local recreational, social, and civic groups in the individual's area. So some of you might be familiar with community mapping activities, and yep, there we go, which really is about a provider or a family member literally listing out the local places in the neighborhood or in their area of town where any recreational, social, and civic events occur. So an example might be if an individual who likes to run and is considered to be a runner may join the town's running store group. So sharing the common interest and then getting involved at the local level makes it convenient and easy and likely that friendships can develop. Another example might be somebody who is interested in learning more about healthy eating habits. So Weight Watchers would be a well-known group in most any town where people could join and hopefully have the same kind of result while they also learn about healthy eating. Most of you are probably also familiar with Meetup.com. This has been used extensively in the Pathways project, and I have to tell you, it's really been successful. I have a gentleman I work with who has the interest of assembling model cars, and his provider went on Meetup.com and sure enough found a group of men, adult men, who get together once a month, and that's their interest. They bring models, they assemble models, they hang out at the hobby shops and all of that good stuff. So that was certainly right up that alley for that gentleman. And then also a good place to check out is actually the Widening the Circle Pathways website, which I've provided the link here in the PowerPoint through the Arc of Mass website. You can find the Widening the Circles Pathways, which has a huge list of different kinds of recreational, social, and civic organizations. So bound to find something that can work. Next slide. So more on becoming a member of an existing group is looking into the possibility of an individual exploring a faith-based group. So this can be a really rich resource for friendships because, just by nature, any faith-based group is going to be very welcoming. And again, if we really look at the individual's interests and talents, possible roles they can take on with the faith-based group, you know, it can go a lot of different directions. If they enjoy singing and music, for example, perhaps they'd be interested in joining the choir. Maybe they'd be more inclined to be an usher at the service, or maybe volunteer to provide coffee and donuts or a meal after the service, whichever way the organization does that. A lot of individuals might be interested in volunteering at the nursery that the church or synagogue might have. There's just endless possibilities as far as opportunities really to join groups, existing groups in faith-based organizations, and they can be just really great resources for people to develop relationships and friendships. So next, yeah. So also another category is really thinking about the needs-based groups. So if there are individuals who struggle with specific issues in their life, as many people do, common kinds of groups that are available pretty much throughout the Commonwealth might be if somebody is struggling with a weight issue. I think I mentioned the Weight Watchers earlier, but also another organization that's been around a long time is called TOPS, and the links are here in the PowerPoint. If they happen to struggle with addiction issues, they certainly could join Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon, which are very welcoming as well. And I think that, you know, aside from the fun kinds of activities we tend to think of, which are very important, we also need to pay attention if anybody needs any groups just based on the needs they have in their life. And bereavement can be a last category, and you know, to get support in that area if need be. Next. So I'd like to share some tips around improving opportunities for membership. One thing that is just really critical and good reminders for all direct support professionals is to be sure that the individual is truly interested in the organization in which they're trying to pursue membership. Sometimes we fall into situations where it's more the staff might be interested or the family might be interested, but is the actual person that we're supporting, you know, are they truly interested in that? Because in fairness, you know, it really needs to be completely about them and making sure that they really have the interest. Also, that they need to be aware of what is possibly expected of them from members. If they're going to be joining any kinds of groups or have membership, they need to be aware of what the different expectations might be. For example, there can be learning, the opportunity to learn jargon or language that's associated with different groups so that they're sort of included in and understand, you know, what's being discussed. We want them to really dress appropriately to fit in with the group. For example, you know, somebody who's in a hiking club would obviously dress much different than somebody who's in a choir member, like I said there on the slide. You know, sort of an obvious example, but just demonstrating that, you know, if somebody is going to be on a committee, for example, that they dress nicely and appropriate and just blend in right with everyone else. And then lastly, to really understand the different rituals people can encounter. Typically this would fall into the faith-based groups, but I think, you know, sort of an overview of expectations, dress, and rituals is really important prior to the event, so we're really setting people up for success as much as possible. Next. So just to continue on with more tips to improve the opportunities for membership is to try and find a key person. Sometimes this can be a staff person who is familiar with the group, and if the individual really is interested in that, joining that group, then that can be a great person. Even better is if maybe the staff person knows somebody else who's a member of the group who can be that key person, so that we find somebody who's already a valued member, and the individual can sort of rely on them to be their support person at the event. And that person should be somebody who's very consistent and willing to take on that role sort of as a support or mentor kind of a position. And that's really helpful in making sure that the person is set up for success. And, you know, it can be kind of scary going into new events, and they sort of, most people at least would benefit from having that key person from the beginning. So another strategy could be to start a group, which is always an option if, you know, something might come up in an interest survey and you cannot locate a local group with that person's interest. It would be a great idea to try and start your own with the support of the person, of course, and just keeping in mind that you should be sure to invite people both with disabilities and people without, so that it's a truly integrated group. Okay, and if you do, sorry, one last thing just to add, that if you do end up beginning a group, that you can definitely post it on Meetup. So when somebody else has the same interest and they're looking on Meetup for that topic, then they're going to be able to see your group and join in. So your membership will really grow. So, okay. So this strategy really is around building relationships and getting involved with a cause in the community. And I wanted to talk about Tim Voigt, who's a nationally known speaker. His company, Starfire, uses best practices in family-directed community engagement. And his company really has launched community projects that have been very interesting. And he's a very dynamic speaker if you ever get a chance to hear him in person or even to read any of his materials. But he works with adults with developmental disabilities and matches them with ordinary citizens in the community. Also, a lot of times family members are involved. But what he does, he's asking what in the neighborhood community, workplace, parish, whatever the group might be, is waiting to be born that can really help to build the community and be a format for friendships to result, really close relationships. So his organization has done this by giving families startup money so the individual can pursue their community-based interest while rebuilding that community. And Tim has just done some amazing different things with this idea. For example, one person in their family who received the startup money started a community garden in their neighborhood because there wasn't such a thing, and the individual really was interested in gardening, and they developed a place where local ordinary people can come and spend time doing something that they all love, which is really neat. Another great example from Tim is that of what's called a pop-up dog park. So in this individual's area, there wasn't access to a dog park, but his passion really was dogs and being around dogs and meeting people with dogs, that kind of thing. So the startup money from the organization went to the individual and their family, and so this sort of spontaneous dog park in their neighborhood was built. And now the gentleman can spend time interacting with the dogs and the owners and, you know, assist with walking and interacting with the dogs. And it's sort of a great situation where, you know, another example of where relationships can really develop from there. So I love that example. Okay, so some organizations are already in our areas, which I just wanted to point out. Some of you may have accessed these before, but just to mention them, the Best Buddies organization, and the link is there on the screen, bestbuddiesmassachusetts.org, and they match Typically, it's in a lot of places, it's children, but they also work with adults with disabilities, matching them a lot of times either with high school students or college students. And even if it's relatively short term, say it's a college student and, they're in the area for 4 years, then, hopefully the relationship could continue should the student even move out of the immediate area and that kind of thing. But, to have a great, flourishing friendship for 4 years would certainly be wonderful. Another example is unified sports, which is part of the Special Olympics program. And we really, as far as Pathways, recommend that because it's opportunity for people with disabilities and people without to really interact and participate in sports that they really share the love of. And it's a great opportunity for friends to meet and to, if you're in the same place consistently playing a sport with the same people, then relationships are bound to result. Next. Okay. So another good strategy to consider is that of an individual learning new skills and in community settings, which is really the key. So to enrich the individual's lives and, if they're seeking new knowledge, then a good example of that would be to learn, if somebody's interested in learning new cooking skills, they might get involved in adult education class at the local high school or community college, as opposed to sometimes we see those kinds of cooking classes being held at the service agency office or service agency day program or in the group home. But, the truth be told, the chances of finding new friendships are pretty limited if you're doing it within the agency like that. So just thinking a little bit outside of that is if these are offered in communities such as the high schools or local community colleges, then we really encourage people to get involved. Because if they're out in the community and of the community, then the results are going to be the desired relationships and friendships, I believe. So, okay, and this is, I feel like, a really timely strategy, connecting with our neighbors. For some reason, it seems a whole lot easier to do that around holiday time. But a recommendation might be for an individual to host some kind of a neighborhood event. Holiday caroling could certainly easily be done this time of year. When the summer rolls around, a block party could certainly be held. Those kinds of things that really sort of engage different neighbors with everybody is a good time to meet, because as busy as everybody is these days, sometimes it's very hard to find the time to really reach out to neighbors. Food always works as a great means of meeting new people. If you see that there's a new family moving in or a new person in the neighborhood, why not? If the individual wants to make some food or bake cookies or whatever it is to bring over to the new neighbors, that can be a really great thing, welcoming and break the ice sort of for that relationship to start right from the beginning. Again, seems sort of timely with shoveling snow. Who wouldn't be thrilled if another neighbor came and shoveled your sidewalk for you? So I feel like, if individuals are interested and capable of doing that, then those are really great examples of how we can connect with neighbors. One of the takeaways really is to make sure that we're emphasizing that people who happen to live in a group home or who might live in an apartment in a neighborhood, should do everything so that they just blend right into the neighborhood, and, we don't emphasize any differences. So if we're going to host a cookout in the summertime, then instead of inviting several other group homes, I would recommend inviting friends and family members and definitely neighbors, so that we're really all inclusive with everybody. And another demonstration of how, friendships really can continue from there. this strategy, reconnecting with people from the past, it's pretty easy to do that in these days of social media. There's so many different venues available to us. And I know of examples where people have been able to connect with their old neighbors they used to live next door to, or teachers or other people, former staff who've been in their life. And that's a really great way to sort of rekindle those relationships that maybe just have faded a bit over time. So the other thing is, if there is a former staff person who knows and had a good relationship with the individual, to try and see if that person might be interested in spending some time with the individual as a volunteer, and sort of, again, rekindle that friendship. Different organizations have different policies around that, so you might want to check and make sure if you're a service provider, but you know, hopefully we can work around that so that if there was that good relationship, it can continue, just, you know, even though the person no longer works for the agency. Okay. Sometimes there's opportunities to have interns or short-term volunteers involved. And a lot of times the people are employed as interns short-term, and a lot of times their responsibilities are actually being companions to the people they support. And their responsibilities are to take the person or go out with them in the community and get them involved in activities. But it could be a better use of their time for interns or volunteers to really establish membership with the individual someplace in the community, so that when the intern or volunteer may leave that position, then that relationship could continue. So we wouldn't want to see all of their good work undone as soon as they leave. If the individual gets connected with someone in the community, then, you know, hopefully that relationship could sustain even when the intern or volunteer would leave the position. Okay, next. So I'd like to share a story of a gentleman I work with named Jeffrey, who's in both pictures on your screen. And he has a pretty neat story. He's actually made two friends in pursuing two different interests of his. You can see that he's somebody who works out at the gym. That's an interest that he's been pursuing for about a year now. And but in the past, he wasn't even going to the gym at all. And it's, the second picture is him attending church services. And up until about a year ago, he wasn't attending on a consistent basis. So he didn't have any friends or relationships in any of those two areas. When he joined his local Y and he started attending on the same days and basically the same times, he met Nick, who is a gentleman pictured on the left, and with Jeffrey, and he works out on the similar schedule to Jeff. So they see each other frequently. And in the beginning, Nick began assisting Jeffrey in with some of the workout equipment and how to use it properly and safely. And in the past year, their friendship has really developed. They see each other very frequently, and they've discovered they have a lot of other topics of shared interest, including the love of cars. And then when Jeff began attending his church services consistently, he sat next to Linda, who's pictured on the right. He sat next to her pretty much every week, and they became friends, chatting in the basement of the church after service. They have coffee and donuts, and they would talk over that. And since then, they've become involved in different roles in the church during the service, such as bringing up the weekly offering to the altar, which is what Jeff is doing in the picture on the right-hand side. And Linda has also begun to visit Jeff periodically at his group home. So I really consider this, you know, a pretty good success, considering that Jeff has been really focusing on developing new friendships for about a year, and which isn't a terribly long amount of time, but I'd say his story really is a work in progress because there's still room for next steps to be taken. And for example, maybe Jeff and Nick could go out for lunch sometime after a workout, or because they share their love of cars, maybe they could go to a car show sometime together, which would be awesome. And Linda possibly could attend a holiday event in the community with Jeffrey. There's just endless possibilities, but he has established good, strong connections with both of these folks in the community. So I feel like, you know, the sky's the limit as far as Jeffrey and his story goes, and as he continues. So the last page really is additional resources that I've used, and you're welcome to check out any of those, and different well-known speakers on the topic of friendships between people with disabilities and without disabilities. So at this time, are there questions? Is there additional information people would like to know? Questions of any kind?
So this is Carrie from the ARC. I had a question. So for Jeffrey,
sure.
How did these situations get started? Was Jeffrey able to just walk into church and, you know, or did he kind of have a support person who knew how to fade, or yeah, I'm just curious.
Sure. Yeah. So the Jeffrey's support team started off with the community interest survey, and that's a really good question, Carrie, because it kind of brings that full circle. That on the survey, Jeffrey definitely had indicated he was interested in joining a gym, and that he also was interested in going to church more often. So recognizing those two interests, the staff sort of took the ball and helped him run with it, helped him to join the Y, and he as well as attend church. And he definitely has a support person who sort of facilitated, especially early on, developing the friendships. So, you know, ensuring that Jeffrey was attending those two places at a regular time, and so that it was likely to see the same people. So if he went randomly, you know, it's very unlikely he'd see the same folks. But that's really how the friendships between he and Nick and he and Linda got started. And the staff were trained with good information on how to, you know, conduct conversations with potential people who are friendly and shared common interests. And with that training, they were able to sort of make introductions and then facilitate some of the conversation. But since those early days, they really have faded quite a bit. They are still providing transportation to Jeffrey for these places, but once he arrives there, they are very, very much in the background, and you know, really just leaving it to Jeffrey and with his newfound friends to enjoy spending time together. So that really was the process as far as Jeffrey is concerned.
Thank you. Yeah, any questions? Just can chat them in. The other question I had, Meg, was just big brother, big sister. Do they work with adults as well? I was always under the impression. Wow, I didn't know that. That's a great resource. Yes,
they do, and sometimes it is through a specific organization. I know that at UMass, I believe it was Charlestown, had a group of physical therapy students who began sort of a local chapter of Big Brother, Big Sister. And that was sort of one of their projects while they were in school, but something they really focused on, and it was a great success. And the really great part about Big Brothers, Big Sisters is that they provide group activities so that people become familiar and comfortable with people in, sort of developing the friendships from an early stage. But then, once they're sort of paired off with people, then it becomes the one-to-one friendship. And, that's sort of the meat of the friendship and can be really beneficial for both people. So that's an example of a local chapter that has done great things with working with adults with disabilities.
Great. How about, I'm just curious about people in the audience. Have you had any success or stories or just challenges in being able to access connecting with others outside of special needs groups and that sort of thing? Anybody want to share an experience that could be positive, or it could be just, not easy as well?
And there certainly are challenges and barriers. I didn't focus on that too much in this presentation today, but there's some pretty common, not having the correct staff ratios, or not, maybe the key person happens to be on vacation and there's a relief staff on duty. Those kinds of things can certainly be challenging and take a lot of management to make sure that things continue to go well. Sometimes there's challenges around individuals' anxiety around new activities or events they're attending. I mean, these are realities that, exist and we all face. And, that's why I really strongly recommend the different strategies so that different avenues can be pursued. And if one thing doesn't work, it's okay. Let's try a different way. So I think persistency is really key.
All right. How about anybody else have a question or something they want to share? A success, a challenge they had, and do some brainstorming on helping with the situation. So through support brokers, I actually support a couple of adults, both who lost their parents because their parents, were in their 90s, and are now living with brothers and sisters. And so just helping to make connections in their special interest areas and that sort of thing. But that, that also takes the support person to be able to introduce them and help them feel comfortable with the eventual, goal of fading out and having a kind of a key, you mentioned that, finding that key person at the place or the situation that will kind of accept some responsibility. And these relationships take a while to develop. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think that's very accurate. And, to be honest, I'm not sure it's all that much different than any other friendships that develop. And, when you really think about, if I start to go to the gym, which would be a great thing, but if I did start to go, then, I wouldn't be necessarily going out for coffee the first few weeks with somebody that I just happened to run into a couple of times. I mean, it may be months really before that would happen. And I think we should have realistic expectations for everyone, including people we support around that as well, that it can be a slow process, and there's certainly nothing wrong with that. We can't expect necessarily, quick results. But like I say, I think the persistency is really important. and the outcome will be well worth it. And people need to be patient and sort of brainstorm around working around barriers. And it can take a lot of time for providers and family members, but I think that it's proven that the resulting friendships are well worth it for everybody's well-being.
Yeah, and just to kind of follow up with that, can you suggest good training for staff to know how to, kind of help the individuals that they support develop a friendship, and then how to fade out of there? So I think that's the, without like sitting in the back of the room, but
Sure.
helping, to kind of, so the places that they go don't see that person as dependent on a staff person to be able to attend there. So if there's any kind of techniques or whatever.
That can be a little tricky too, because, in today's world, safety is just always at the forefront of everyone's mind. And, as providers, we're charged with that responsibility we take very seriously. So to ensure safety, a lot of times we're a little hesitant to back out. But in terms of training and techniques, I would really direct people to the ARC, again, the ARC of Mass website, and follow to the pathways and download information. There's all kinds of good training information on the website, ranging from how to do introductions, and then barriers that can come up, and so how to work around those things. So there's really some great training materials that can be shared with staff on that site.
Okay, great. So Lucy had a question. Do you have any suggestions on getting volunteer friends for a group home for individuals who are nonverbal and have severe ID? Not necessarily one-to-one, but a friend for the house in general.
That's a really good question, Lucy. And I would suggest that you try to take a look at people who are possibly already known to the individuals, or people in their sort of immediate life, such as neighbors. I think could be a really great resource. And it can be very casual, so that maybe as a support professional, you might assist sort of doing introductions, having the neighbor over for coffee with one or two of the individuals you support, and just start off with just sort of a small thing. And then, next time maybe invite them to the barbecue, and, hopefully at some point there'll be a spark of interest there, and, the friendship can kind of take off. As far as being people who we support who are nonverbal, if they're not able to respond to the pictures, if they're not quite capable of doing that in the community interest survey, then we also have relied upon family members to help us to suggest different activities or events that maybe the individual really seemed to enjoy previously in their life. I know a woman who we had no idea, but because she was nonverbal, we were not aware as staff that she loved to swim. And then one day, casually, her mother happened to mention that, and it just sparked all kinds of ideas of, oh, she could join the Y or do this or that, and that's just an example of, until we really ask, family members may not think to even share, well, once upon a time, they really had this kind of an interest, and why not see if that interest might still be there? So those are some recommendations I would have about getting folks who happen to be nonverbal and with severe disabilities involved in their communities.
Okay, great. Anyone else had a question? I think actually, Evelyn, you had a question. So I'm going to unmute you so you can ask it directly. I know he had trouble with the chat pane. So I'm going to unmute Evelyn right now.
Okay.
and go ahead and ask your question. Don't seem to be able to do that. I don't know why. Huh. Sorry, Evelyn. I tried to unmute you and I can't.
Well, you know what? I can give out my email address at the ARC, Carrie. And Evelyn, if you want to email me directly, you are more than welcome to do that. My email is Gaydos, which is my last name, G-A-Y-D like David, O-S like Sam, at arcmass.org. And I'd be happy to respond with any questions you might have.
Oh, okay, great. That will work. All right. Any other questions from the audience? Wait a minute or so. Just to remind you that you will get a copy of the PDF copy of this PowerPoint, and then Meg said you would also send me so I can send to folks the community interest surveys.
Right. I will definitely send that to you so that you can send that out with the PowerPoint. That's a great idea.
Great. Okay. And then after the webinar, you're going to be rerouted to a brief 10-question survey. If you wouldn't mind filling that out, we'd be really, really excited to hear what you felt about the webinar today, the content, and if you had any other questions or any suggestions for some other webinars that we provide through the ARC of Massachusetts. So it doesn't look like we have any other questions. So at this point, I'm just thank you all for attending, and thank you, Meg, for a great presentation. And hope you all have happy holidays to everyone. Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Take
bye-bye.
care.